Hello, my wonderful friends. I hope this week has brought you moments of peace, joy, and reassurance that God is always with you. But even if your days have felt tough, uncertain, or overwhelming, let me remind you of a beautiful truth. God is at work in your life right now, even when it feels like He's silent. There are times when we face challenges and find ourselves wondering, where is God? Why hasn't He answered my prayers yet? But here's something powerful to hold on to. God's provision doesn't always look the way we expect. His plans are higher, His ways are greater, and His timing is always perfect. Even when you don't see it, He's working all things together for your good. God's provision often comes wrapped in the unexpected. Sometimes it's through an open door you weren't even looking for. Other times it's through a no or a delay that turns out to be the best thing that ever happened to you. And while we may not always understand His methods in the moment, we can trust that He is faithful and good, working behind the scenes for our ultimate blessing. So wherever you're joining from, your living room, your car, or perhaps in the middle of a busy day, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. Today we're diving into how God provides in ways you might not anticipate. By the end of this message, my prayer is that you'll feel encouraged, inspired, and reassured that His hand has been guiding you all along, even in the unexpected. God knows what we need even before we ask Him, but often His provision comes in ways that catch us by surprise. We might expect a clear, straightforward answer to our prayers, but instead, God works in ways that stretch our faith and build our character. His provision isn't always about immediate relief. Sometimes it's about teaching us to rely on Him in the process. One powerful example of this can be found in the story of Hagar, as told in Genesis chapter 21, verses 14 to 19. Hagar was in a desperate situation, wandering in the wilderness with her son Ishmael, without food or water. She felt abandoned, hopeless, and sure that her story was over. In her darkest moment, she cried out to God, and He showed up in a way she didn't expect. God didn't rain down water from the sky or send a miraculous caravan to rescue her. He simply opened her eyes to see a well of water that was already there. The provision she desperately needed was closer than she realized. How often do we feel like Hagar, overwhelmed and unable to see the resources God has placed around us? Sometimes we're so consumed by our struggles that we overlook the blessings God has already given. We might be looking for a dramatic miracle, but often His provision is quiet and steady, just enough for the step we need to take next. Hagar's story reminds us that God sees us. Even when we feel invisible to the world, God hears our cries, knows our needs, and provides for us in His perfect way. Hagar's experience is also a reminder that God's provision doesn't just meet our physical needs, it also reassures our hearts. In the wilderness, God didn't just provide water. He reminded Hagar that He hadn't forgotten her or Ishmael. That well of water wasn't just a solution, it was a symbol of God's care and presence. In the same way, God's provision in our lives often carries a deeper message. You are seen, you are loved, you are not alone. When we trust Him, we begin to see the blessings and answers He has already placed around us, even in the most unlikely circumstances. God's provision also comes in His perfect timing, which often doesn't align with ours. A remarkable example of this is the story of Mandisa, the Grammy-winning Christian singer and songwriter. Early in her career, Mandisa faced rejection and significant setbacks, including being eliminated from American Idol. For many people, such a public disappointment might have seemed like the end of the road. Instead of letting discouragement define her future, Mandisa chose to lean into her faith. She prayed, waited, and trusted God to guide her path. Over time, God opened doors she never expected, leading her to become one of the most successful artists in Christian music. Her songs, like Overcomer, became powerful anthems for people walking through their own struggles, and her testimony inspired countless others to trust in God's timing. Mandisa's story is a reminder that God is never late. When we remain faithful and trust His timing, He provides not just what we need, but often something greater than what we imagined. The rejection she once faced was part of the preparation for the platform God had in store for her. It's a beautiful example of how God's timing and provision are always perfect, even when they don't match our own expectations. Sometimes God's provision isn't just about meeting our immediate needs, it's about preparing us for something far greater than we can imagine. Think about Joshua, who led the Israelites into the Promised Land. In Joshua chapter 6, God commanded Joshua to conquer the fortified city of Jericho, not through a typical military strategy, but by marching around the city walls for 7 days and blowing trumpets. To many, this plan must have seemed illogical and even foolish, but Joshua trusted God's instructions. When the Israelites obeyed, the seemingly impossible happened. The walls of Jericho fell, and they claimed the victory God had promised them. God's provision in this situation didn't come through overwhelming military strength, but through His divine power and the obedience of His people. Joshua's story shows us that God's provision often defies human logic. What might seem unconventional or impossible to us is often God setting the stage for something miraculous. When we trust Him, even when His methods don't make sense, He reveals His strength and faithfulness in ways that leave no doubt that the glory belongs to Him. Have you ever prayed for something only to feel disappointed when the answer didn't come the way you expected? It's easy to feel frustrated and even wonder if God is listening. But what if the delay or detour you're experiencing isn't rejection, it's redirection? Often, what feels like an unanswered prayer is God working behind the scenes to provide something far better than what you had in mind. Joanna Gaines, co-founder of Magnolia and star of Fixer Upper, has shared how this principle unfolded in her life. Before Magnolia became a household name, Joanna faced seasons of doubt and uncertainty. She has spoken openly about moments where she had to release control, trust God's timing, and step into the opportunities He brought her way, even when they didn't look like the plans she had imagined. Her journey is a powerful testament to the fact that aligning our hearts with God's will often leads to blessings beyond anything we could have expected. Joanna's story also reminds us that God's provision isn't always about the destination, it's about who He's shaping us to be along the journey. In those seasons of waiting and uncertainty, God builds our faith, develops our character, and equips us for the doors He's preparing to open. When we let go of our expectations and surrender to His plans, we experience the joy of His provision, which is always greater, more fulfilling, and more perfect than anything we could have planned for ourselves. Isaiah chapter 55 verses 8-9 says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." This verse reminds us that God's wisdom and understanding are far beyond what we can comprehend. What may seem like a delay, a denial, or even a setback in our eyes is often part of a much bigger plan that He is orchestrating for our good. Think about how often we pray with a specific outcome in mind, only to find that God's answer doesn't match our expectations. Yet in hindsight, we often realize His provision was exactly what we needed, even if it didn't make sense at the time. God's provision goes beyond material blessings. It encompasses the strength to endure trials, the wisdom to make the right decisions, and the peace that surpasses all understanding. His guidance isn't just about solving today's problem, but shaping our hearts for eternity. Trusting His perspective means surrendering our limited view and leaning into His infinite wisdom. So, the next time you encounter a closed door, pause and ask God what He's doing in your life. That closed door could be a redirection to a path filled with greater blessings. When you trust His perspective, you allow Him to lead you to the best He has prepared for you, even if it doesn't look like what you expected. So, how can we recognize and embrace God's provision in our lives? First, surrender your expectations. This is easier said than done because We often want God to answer our prayers in specific ways, but surrendering means letting go of the need to control how and when He works. Trusting Him doesn't mean giving up, it means acknowledging that He knows better than we do. Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 to 6 says "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will make straight your paths." Second, practice gratitude daily. Gratitude opens your heart to see God's hand in your life. When you take time to thank Him for what He has already done, you become more aware of His blessings, both big and small. Start each day by listing a few things you're grateful for. It could be as simple as the breath in your lungs or the beauty of the sunrise. Gratitude shifts your focus from what you lack to what God has already provided, and this change in perspective allows you to see His faithfulness more clearly. Third, remain faithful in prayer and obedience. Prayer is not just a way to ask for things, it's a way to align your heart with God's will. Through prayer, you build a deeper relationship with Him, learning to trust His timing and guidance. At the same time, obedience plays a key role. Often God's provision comes as we take small steps of faith in response to His instructions. Stay connected to Him even when it feels like nothing is happening, because those moments of stillness are often where He does His greatest work. Finally, surround yourself with people who encourage your faith. God often uses others to speak into our lives, providing wisdom, support, or reminders of His promises. A Christ-centered community can help you stay grounded and focused on God's faithfulness, even during challenging times. As we close, let me remind you of one of the most beautiful promises in Scripture found in Romans chapter 8, verse 28, and we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to His purpose. This verse is a foundation of hope for every believer. It reminds us that even when life feels messy, uncertain, or painful, God is weaving all things together into a masterpiece. Whatever you're facing today, trust that God is providing for you in ways you can't yet see. He is faithful to His promises, and He will never leave you or forsake you. Even in the waiting, even in the struggle, God is working behind the scenes, crafting a story that glorifies Him and blesses you. Lean into His presence, trust His process, and let Him renew your strength. My friend, God's provision is always enough. He sees you, He knows your needs, and He is more than able to provide for you. Take heart in knowing that His plans for you are good, even when they don't match your timeline or expectations. If this message has encouraged you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Don't forget to like and subscribe to stay connected as we continue to explore the incredible ways God works in our lives. Let's keep growing in faith together. Thank you for joining me today. Stay blessed, trust in His provision, and I'll see you in the next video.